Talks between the U.S. and Mexico have begun following the announcement that 5% tariffs would be placed on Mexican imports. They'll go up 5% each month if the country doesn't put an end to the illegal flow of immigrants at the U.S.-Mexico border. But the business community and even members of the president's own party say that the move could be disastrous.
My experience with the president is he's a very smart man. I wouldn't call him risk averse. He's been known to play with fire, but not live hand grenades. And if he slaps a 25% tariff on Mexico, it's going to tank the American economy.
Joining me now to discuss the concerns surrounding the tariffs and the impact it could potentially have on U.S.-Mexico relations is leading expert and national security and foreign policy analysis, James Carafano. He was the head of the President Trump's transition team for foreign policy. Dr. Carafano, welcome.
Hey, good
also,
to meet you.
should mention he's my former professor in graduate school, so this is a...
And you passed.
I did.
So,
I did. He gave me an A, actually.
Yeah.
So let's get into it, sir. So you came out with a statement against the tariffs, saying that while Americans are greatly harmed by illegal immigration, these tariffs would only further punish our citizens, forcing them to pay more for basic goods and services, all because Washington has consistently failed to do its job. Now, why did you put out that statement, and why do you feel that the tariffs is not the right way to go after the illegal immigration crisis at the border?
Well, there's nothing wrong with tariffs. I mean, the founding fathers made provisions for that. And Alexander Hamilton, in his groundbreaking foundation report, but what he says, there's three reasons you do tariffs. One is to raise revenue. That's not what we're doing here. The second one is to protect, in a sense, national security industries. So, for example, if you were building ships back then,
steel,
right?
In the current
okay,
sure.
and the third is to drive reciprocity. Well, this fits neither of those cases. This is really a form of economic warfare using an economic threat to address something else. So it doesn't fit in kind of the way we think of how do you run a free market economy. And also, I think if you look at the law, that the authorities, which really until relatively recently were given to the president. Normally, tariffs were essentially decided by Congress, and they actually changed very little. And when they did change, it's mostly because the politics in Washington changed. It's only in recent memory where we've ceded more and more authority, say the president decides when to impose tariffs. But if you look what the law says, this is not, I think, what the law envisions. So I think from a policy perspective, it's using the wrong instrument for the wrong task.
So what's the right instrument then? That's the real question.
Well,
because Washington is broken. I mean, the immigration laws aren't going to change. And Memorial Day, I think, was the highest day on record at the southern border, tens of thousands of people coming per month. The president has to do something, right?
Well, this is what's really interesting about that. Part of the problem why we've never had kind of a comprehensive addressing of immigration and border security reform is because we all agree on about the 80%, and we disagree on the 20%. So the answer is, well, let's hold the 80% hostage and do nothing until we address the 20%. And we tried that several times and it failed. But what's interesting is part of the 80% used to be border security. I mean, it's not a distant memory. Just a few years ago, when you couldn't tell a Democrat from a Republican on the need to secure the border. And now it's become a hyper-partisan issue, where actually securing the border is defined by whether you're an R or a D. So I do share the president's frustration, and in order, in a sense, to play hardball politics with him, we've literally compromised our demand border. And if you look at what the president's doing, he's trying every means possible to demonstrate if the border's not secure, it's not my fault. I've done everything I could. And certainly dealing with Mexico is part of that. And the Mexicans have been kind of on again, off again in cooperation. So trying to get their attention, no argument there. Nobody thinks that tariffs is the right way to do it.
But it does seem to have worked, right? I mean, they're here in town, they're here to talk. Whether these tariffs actually go, a lot of people I've spoken with are doubtful that many of the tariffs will even go into effect, that they'll try and find a saving grace.
I think there's kind of two clues there that you want to look at. First of all, if you actually read the statement itself, the statement doesn't define what the Mexicans have to do to avoid this.
Right.
That's interesting. The second thing is if you were going to drop a hammer, you wouldn't start out with 5% tariffs. So, and even that was, there was time in there. So there's a reason, obviously the president's looking for a negotiated solution. Otherwise he wouldn't have put a graduated status in there. He just would have said, well, you got 90 days and I'm going to drop 25% tariffs on you. And he would have specifically said, if you don't, do X, Y, or Z. Clearly there's interest in talking on both sides. I mean, the Mexicans would not have sent a massive delegation here if they weren't interested in finding a way forward. And it's interesting is they're interested not just in talking to the administration, but they've in a sense been running around town and talking to everybody, saying, what do these guys want? What can we do? And I think it is fair for the White House to play hardball. But to me, this is the key point: is it's in both countries' interests to cooperate to make the border work better, and they have to find a way to do that. All the blame is certainly not on the president's side. It's not only Democrats in Congress that essentially have been trying to undercut the ability to control the border, but this government, not just on border security and on a lot of issues, hasn't really been as effective as people had hoped.
As somebody who knows the border well, what do the Mexicans need to do? What is it that you and somebody who knows this issue well, what can they do? Can they stop asylum seekers from crossing the border? Do they need to secure their own southern border?
Yeah.
Is there just a host of things?
Well, keeping the numbers away from the border is a big deal. If you actually look at the gross numbers, the increase has been dramatic, but in terms of the gross crossings, it's actually not at a high. But it's the spike and the reason why the spike is so concerning is because we're not sending those people back. In the old days, if you caught somebody, you would just stick them in expedited removal, which means if you're caught within 100 miles of the border within 14 days, you can have a very quick assessment, and then boom, you're on a bus or a plane, you're out of here. Now, because of the dramatic increase in meritless asylum claims, and just because of the spike in the numbers, we're just having a problem having the border be the deterrent, because once you get in, a lot of those people are getting into the interior. Once they get in the interior, it's much more difficult to deport them. Traditionally, what we've seen on the border is when it seems like you can get in and get into the interior, that's an incentive for more people to come.
It's a draw factor.
$5,000, $10,000, $15,000 that you might pay a human smuggler to take you to the border. That doesn't seem very attractive if your likelihood of getting caught and being sent back to Mexico. But if you're just going to get caught, matter of fact, don't get caught. Find a border patrol guy and turn yourself in, right? And get released into the interior. That's a good deal. Overwhelmingly, people that are processed either for an asylum claim or anything else, they're not showing up for their deportation hearings at all. So they're just coming in the country and then just remaining illegally.
Have you gotten any pushback from the administration on this? I mean, they obviously, the president feels very strongly that this is the right way. And given your own, you traditionally back the president on almost everything that he's doing.
First of all, I worked on the presidential transition team, but that's a nonpartisan activity.
Yeah.
You're just and all we've ever done is call balls and strikes. That is all we do. Now, there are a lot of things this administration's doing, which I agree with. Things if I were president, I would do that. I like it, when the administration actually does something I disagree with, because it allows us to demonstrate that no, we're not just here to cheerlead for the administration. If they do something wrong, we call them at it. So I've been very critical about Libya policy, and this I think is clearly the wrong step. And we don't have, I don't have any problem with telling the administration we're wrong. Matter of fact, the first thing I do when we do something like that is I turn around and I send it to the White House. So, if you guys haven't seen this, by the way, I disagree with you. And weirdly enough, which is 180 degrees out from the Obama administration, with this administration, what I found is when you disagree with them, they thank you for your opinion. Sometimes they follow up. Sometimes they say, we understand, but we're doing this for whatever. But I've never said, okay, that guy's off the White House list. He can't come in anymore. So they actually like constructive criticism, and that's what we try to offer here.
So you've watched the president negotiate and go about his days now for a couple years. When it comes down to this negotiation, what is the end game for the president? Is it to find a political path where he can show the electorate, I have done everything I possibly could to stop what is going on at that border, and there's only one option: have Congress change the law?
I think that's right. I think the partisan divide on border immigration is just too broad to be bridged, and I think what the president wants to do is pick a side, pick me or pick them, vote our guys in or vote my guys in, and that this is an issue to put before the American people in 2020. I think that's why they put their immigration plan on the. Put their immigration plan out now, not because they thought Congress was going to vote on it, but because they think people should have a choice. And I think part of that is he has to demonstrate that he's done everything he can to do it without Congress, to say to the American people, well, you've got one choice here. So I think clearly that's is the end game in the strategy.
Well, we haven't seen any Democratic candidate even propose trying to secure the border, right? We haven't yet seen. So the president's actions, if actually draws the starkness between him and the entire Democratic
So here's
field.
and I do politics. I do politics. I work at a nonpartisan foundation. So, and in my politics, I'm not even a Republican. And what I know about politics, you could probably fit in that cup. But I think this is common sense. From a political standpoint, here's the president's challenge, and it's not just Mexico and tariffs, but also tariffs in China and everything else is. What gets a president reelected in the United States? You don't start World War III, and the economy continues to grow and prosper. He has to keep an eye on both those balls the next 18 months. And if there's a perception or a reality of the economy slowing down, and if there's a perception of the reality that people see that tied to the tariff policies, and you haven't delivered on anything from the tariff policies, that's an albatross to count in the election. So you can play with tariff policies for a bit, but then you've got to keep one eye on the economy. And if you're getting too close to the end there, you really have to think about that. So, and the Mexicans and the Chinese and everybody else aren't stupid. They know that too. And I think in a lot of things, a lot of people are saying, well, how do we know this guy's going to be back in 2 years? Why do something now? But they've also got pressure as well. So it's not like they don't have all the cards. Obviously, Mexico would be severely impacted by any restrictions, and that would be really bad for the economy. Same thing with the Chinese. Everybody's got strengths and weaknesses, and so there's a bit of chicken going on here, that's for sure.
Absolutely. Well, very interesting, and thank you so much for joining us, sir.
Thanks for
Good
having
to see you again. So we'll have more coming up for you on Rising after this.